maybe you are a young person and you are thinking it would be a great thing to get together with some friends, maybe over Zoom or Skype, or hopefully soon in person. And so I want to affirm you in that, and I'm hoping that what I've got here will be a help to you. So, how to run a Bible study. Decide ahead of time what you are going to study. Maybe you want to pick a book of the Bible to go through bit by bit, or maybe you want to say, okay, we're going to look at a few sayings of Jesus. In any case, it's a good idea to have in your mind ahead of time what you're going to study, and to give yourself time as well to become familiar with the passage. A really useful tool for that would be a study Bible, and there's even stuff online that you can learn from, which can be helpful. So decide what you're going to look at ahead of time, become familiar with it, read it heaps and heaps. Pray for your Bible study before everyone else rocks up. Ask for the Lord's help as you lead. And then even once you've gathered everyone together, I really believe it's important to ask the Lord for His help in bringing understanding as you open up the Bible together. In Psalm 119, I think verse 18, it says, like, Lord, would you open up my eyes that I would behold wondrous things out of your law. And so there's this recognition that, like, outside of the Lord's help, we're kind of blind to it, and we really need His eye-opening work for us. And so pray before you guys get started. What I like to do is I like to ask somebody in the group to read the scriptures for the rest of the group out loud. And then once that's been done, I like to pick on someone and say, hey, now without looking, can you retell the story or retell what it says? And for the rest of the group, if John forgets something here, just interrupt him and say, yeah, but what about this thing? And so you turn it into a group effort. And that's to show that we all have this ability to actually speak God's truth to one another. Once we've done that, then I ask a series of questions. 1, what stood out? What grabbed your attention? What stood out to you? Number 2, I say, what is it that you see about God in this part of the Bible? Number 3, I say, what do you see about people, humankind, ourselves, yourself? What do you see about us? And I say, it's a tricky one. Why has God put it in there for us? Why is it important for us to know this? And then I like to ask, well, how do we get to Jesus from here? And what I've got in mind here is that there's this part in the Bible where Jesus is walking along a road and he's with 2 guys, and they don't recognize Jesus for who He is yet. Jesus was explaining to these guys about how the Old Testament pointed to Himself. And so I've got that question, how do we get to Jesus, as there's something there. If you're looking at an Old Testament passage, it's good for us to be thinking through, like, how does this point forward to Jesus? Now that's where a study Bible can really come in handy, or thinking through the big themes of the Bible, like kingdoms and kings, like Jesus is king and He's got a kingdom, or the law or the sacrifices that were made, or the temple, like all of that points to Jesus somehow. Stories of how people went and grabbed victory for God's people, that all points to Jesus, right? And so that's a pretty important thing. Like, even when we're in the Old Testament, we want to make sure that we get to Jesus and to His work on the cross. Because that's how people are saved, right? So by believing in Jesus. I like to ask, what change needs to happen? Is it a change of mind? Like, do I need to change my mind about something, or is it a life change? Do I need to change the way that I live, or is it a belief change? Like, actually, I've been believing the wrong thing, and that needs to change. And that's a really important question, because like, we're not just out to learn stuff from the Bible, but the goal of it is that we would live differently as a result of knowing God and His Word. And like, we can't like fully live out that change ourselves. Like, we need to be empowered by God and His Spirit as we do that. But it's good for us to ask those questions, like, what needs to change? And then lastly, the question that I ask the group is, okay, who needs to hear a message like this? Like, from the Bible passage that we've got before us, like, who needs to hear a message like everybody needs, everybody needs to hear it. But who is it that you know that needs to hear a message like this? Do you think you could tell them this week? And anyway, so those are the series of questions that I ask. And did you notice something about those questions? Is that they're not particular to any single passage of the Bible, right? So they could be asked of like anywhere in the Bible. Part of that is, I guess, laziness on my part, and it's like easy to prepare, but there's other benefits as well. And that's in asking the same questions week after week after week. We're actually teaching the other people in our group like how to run their own Bible study. Like, the idea is that like we wouldn't just have this little group forever, but they would grow and they would have their own group. Say if I ask the question, okay, so what stood out to you from that passage? And somebody says, okay, this thing stood out to me. I always ask, where do you see that? Just to make sure that like we're not just coming up with ideas off the top of our head, but that we're actually drawing out what God says. The other benefit about asking the same questions week after week, and it shows to each other that everyone in the group has the ability to like open up the Bible and hear God for themselves. If you've got like really particular questions about a passage, it can cause some people to really clam up because they're thinking, oh, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to sound stupid in front of everyone. And plus, old mate Sheldon, who's running the study, like he's got the answer written down right in front of him. And so to ask things like, what do you see about God? What do you see about people? Like, it shows that like we can all get something out of this. And it means that you can even have somebody who's a not yet believer in Jesus, and they can be in your group as well. Try to encourage others to speak more than what you do. You don't want to be sort of preaching a sermon to a group of people, but you're there to share with one another. For the quiet people in your group, one trick that I like to do is to aim a question directly at them. Sarah, why do you think God put this in the Bible? And sure, Sarah might sort of say, I don't know, but that's totally fine. What you're doing is, some people, like, they might not be as ready to kind of butt in, but you're just creating that space. What do you do with people who like talk too much? So decide ahead of time how you're going to deal with somebody who like really kind of takes over the conversation, takes over the group. I've had the real pleasure of being in a Bible study group in Malaysia, and no joke, the pastor literally did this as people were talking, and people are talking, and then he goes, time, and then he moves on. I've brought out my phone and said, okay, like, we got 1 minute, and just had it ticking away in front of people, even if it's just saying, hey, well, let's hold that thought, because we got to move on. And if you don't know something, like somebody asks you a question, don't be afraid to say, yeah, I don't know, like, I'm gonna try to find out over the next week and I'll get back to you. Lastly, know that whatever mistakes that you make along the way, it's all being covered by Jesus. Know that he is surely pleased with you in wanting to lead a group of friends in learning from him. And so I will leave you with that. Thank you for listening to me. I hope some of that is helpful. God bless you guys. Peace.